Before we dive into this incredible story, let's take off the rose-colored glasses. In the world of finance, we are often taught the exact same dogma. To win, you have to be aggressive, ruthless, and ready to step on anyone's toes. We are shown images from Wall Street where success is measured by the size of someone else's loss. But what if this approach is fundamentally flawed? What if the most profitable long-term strategy in business is something most cynical dealers would call a weakness? Today, we are going to break down a story that shatters every conventional blueprint of business education. This is the chronicle of a profound social experiment that proved the laws of human ethics can operate with the precision of mathematical formulas, even in an environment where human life was sometimes valued less than a piece of unrefined carbon. Part 1. An unusual assignment. You are about to meet a man who spent his mornings meditating in a quiet monastery and his afternoons selling diamonds to some of the toughest dealers in New York City. That is not a contradiction. That is the whole story. His name is Michael Roach. Some people call him Geshe Michael. And his path from a silent Buddhist temple to a business that reportedly reached hundreds of millions of dollars in sales is one of the strangest financial education stories you will ever hear. Picture New Jersey in 1972. A young man named Michael Roach has just graduated from Princeton with honors. He was even given a Presidential Scholar Medal at the White House. On paper, his future looks obvious. Law school, Wall Street, a corner office by 30. He did not take that path. Instead, he traveled to India to study Buddhism. Not as a tourist, as a serious student. He kept going back, year after year. He spent his days studying ancient texts, learning Tibetan, and sitting with teachers who had fled their homeland after China's invasion of Tibet. By the mid-1970s, he became an ordained monk. Stop for a second. Think about what that means financially. No salary, no possessions beyond a few robes and books. A life built entirely around study and discipline. Think about this. Wealth is not only measured in your bank account, it is also measured in what you have trained your mind to want. Roach spent years training his mind to want very little. That single decision would later protect him in ways money never could. Years passed. Roach lived a monk's life while quietly becoming one of the first Westerners to earn the rare Geshe degree. It is a title similar to a doctorate in Buddhist philosophy, requiring over 2 decades of intense study to achieve. To understand the scale of this achievement, imagine the training system inside the Sera May Tibetan monastery. This wasn't just quiet contemplation. It involved daily, multi-hour theological debates. Monks would pair up. One would sit and defend a thesis from an ancient scripture, while the other stood over him, gesturing aggressively, clapping his hands, and trying to catch the opponent in a logical error. This was rigorous training in critical thinking, managing emotions under pressure, and spotting cause and effect relationships where others saw only chaos. This psychological resilience would later become his ultimate secret weapon during high-stakes negotiations in New York. But his teacher, a revered monk named Ken Rinpoche, faced a very earthly, practical crisis. The Tibetan refugee community in exile was on the brink of survival and needed money. Real money. Printing ancient texts, maintaining schools, feeding, and providing medical care for hundreds of monks who had no citizenship or employment cost, far more than donations from a small temple could ever cover. So Ken Rinpoche called Roach in and gave him the most paradoxical assignment in the history of Buddhism. Go to New York City, get a job in the most aggressive business you can find. Make millions of dollars for the community. But do it in a way that keeps your conscience and your vows absolutely spotless. Part 2. From the monastery to the Diamond District. Draw a line down the middle of your notebook right now. On one side, write Monastery. On the other side, write Manhattan Diamond District. Roach was about to live on both sides of that line at once. He did not walk into a corner office. He walked from company to company, asking for any job at all. Door after door closed on him. Eventually, one man, an immigrant from Israel named Ofer Azrielant, gave him a chance. It is important to realize that Ofer didn't hire him out of pity. He needed an outsider, a guy from Princeton who wasn't entangled with the local family clans and could be trained completely from scratch. The starting pay was reportedly $7 an hour. His duties? Sweeping floors, carrying heavy boxes, running errands, and sitting at a sorting table sorting through tons of low-grade, tiny stones. Notice something important here. Nobody starts at the top of a new industry. Roach had a prestigious degree from an elite university and decades of deep spiritual education, but absolutely none of that mattered on his first day in the diamond trade. He sat on his haunches collecting scraps from the table, just like any other trainee. If you are starting small right now, or feel like your true potential is being completely ignored, this is not a reason to quit. It is simply the system testing your resilience. The company was called Andin International, a jewelry manufacturer built by Ofer and his wife Aya. At that moment, it was a very vulnerable family startup. It had almost nothing when it began. A modest loan, a tiny staff, and a complete lack of leverage in the industry. And in the jewelry trade, where a single physical display tray can be worth as much as a luxury city block, reputation is the only capital that allows you to secure inventory on credit. To give you some context, Manhattan's Diamond District in the late 1970s and 1980s was a state within a state. It was a closed, insular world dominated by tight-knit families and legendary dealers who could spot a weakness in a split second. Million-dollar deals were sealed with a simple verbal handshake, the phrase, mazal ubracha, combining the Hebrew words for luck and blessing. They didn't trust outsiders. They didn't care about legal contracts, and they lived by unwritten rules. The level of stress and paranoia ran high. Brokers were constantly bluffing, driving prices down, hiding gemstone flaws, and trying to squeeze a cent out of every single carat. This was the exact arena entered by a man who had practiced non-violence and absolute truthfulness for years. Roach worked there for years, eventually rising to a leadership role overseeing gemstones. And he brought something unusual into the office with him, an old Buddhist text called the Diamond Cutter Sutra, one of the oldest printed documents in the world. Part 3. The Void Operating Manual. He did not use this ancient text as decoration. He used it as an actual operating manual. He didn't look for magical formulas in the text. He extracted psychological principles. The sutra taught that your mind registers every action you take. If you cheat a supplier, your mind registers scarcity and fear, which later distorts your business judgment. The core idea was simple, even if the language around it sounds mystical. Every result in your business, every deal, every dollar, comes from a cause you planted earlier. In the diamond trade of the 1980s, cutting corners was common, and getting away with it was almost expected. It was a fast-paced culture where pushing the limits of a diamond's clarity grade was just seen as good salesmanship. Now picture a former monk walking into that room. He refused to inflate a stone's grade. He refused to hide a flaw from a buyer. He refused to pad a number just because he could. That is a pattern interrupt worth sitting with. While competitors were exaggerating clarity grades to squeeze out extra profit, Roach was doing the opposite. He was underselling flaws before buyers even asked. It sounds like it should have driven the company into the ground. It did not. Buyers started requesting Andin specifically because they knew exactly what they were getting. In an industry where trust was the rarest resource of all, this transparency became the company's ultimate competitive advantage. Deals that used to take weeks of suspicion and back and forth started closing in days. Now compare that with your own life. In any market flooded with over-promising, fake case studies and inflated numbers, plain honesty becomes incredibly valuable simply because it is rare. If everyone around you is inflating their numbers, being the one person who does not can be your biggest asset. Part 4. The Double Life of a Millionaire Monk. Now for the emotional core of this story, the part that rarely makes it into the highlight reel. While Andin was growing, Roach was still trying to live strictly as a monk. His schedule was punishing. He woke up for early mornings spent in meditation before sunrise. Then came the long train rides into the city. Next were 16-hour days handling million-dollar deals. And finally, late nights back at a small apartment, translating ancient Tibetan text by lamplight. That massive academic work could not simply stop just because he had a demanding day job now. Two completely different worlds, stitched together inside one exhausted person. Here is the surprising part that most people miss. At this point in the story, the company's annual sales were climbing fast, moving from tens of millions toward the $100 million mark. Roach was personally overseeing an inventory of diamonds worth millions of dollars. He had the keys to the vaults. He had the authority to sign major contracts. Yet, he still owned almost nothing personally. He did not own a car. He did not buy a house. He continued living in a tiny communal space with other practitioners. He wore a simple, cheap suit to the diamond district to blend in. But the moment he returned home, he changed back into his monk's robes. Imagine the mental shift required. During the day, you are negotiating with aggressive Manhattan brokers, surrounded by the most concentrated physical wealth on earth. At night, you are sleeping on a simple mattress, counting your personal net worth in books and robes. He has said in later talks that the money itself never interested him. What interested him was proving an idea. Could ancient ethical principles survive contact with one of the most cutthroat industries on earth? Could kindness actually be tested in a boardroom and come out ahead? That kind of internal conflict is heavier than it sounds. Imagine diamonds moving through your hands that could fund an entire community while you personally keep nothing. He was not chasing a mansion. He was not chasing a title. He was trying to fund monasteries, feed refugee monks, and keep a fragile culture from disappearing, all while carrying the daily stress of running a real business with real payroll and real risk. Part 5. The Warren Buffett Moat. The business grew, and grew again. From a small loan and a handful of employees, Andin expanded into one of the largest jewelry manufacturers supplying major American retailers. By the time Roach stepped down from his active role in 1999, the company he had helped scale was reportedly doing roughly $100 million a year in revenue. Within another decade, that number climbed even higher. It eventually reached a widely reported $250 million in annual sales. It was only in 2009, long after Roach had returned to full-time teaching, that Andin's massive scale attracted Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway Group, which acquired the company through its Richline jewelry division. Let's analyze this for a second from a purely financial perspective. Why would Warren Buffett, the most famous value investor in history, buy a company built on Buddhist principles? Buffett always looks for what he calls an economic moat. A moat is a structural competitive advantage that protects a company from its competitors. It can be a brand, a patent, or a specific cost advantage. But there is another kind of moat that Buffett loves: operational integrity and unbreakable trust. In the jewelry retail sector, the risks are enormous. Giant retail chains like Walmart or Costco cannot afford corporate scandals linked to counterfeit gemstones, dirty supply chains, or endless legal battles. They need partners whose reputation is as clear as ice. Over decades of operations, Andin International built a system where honesty was entirely automated. Major buyers knew that Andin's reports never needed to be double-checked. From a business perspective, Andin's acquisition illustrates the kind of durable operating qualities Warren Buffett has consistently valued throughout his investing career. Its strong reputation, disciplined operations, and long-standing customer relationships made it a lower-risk business in an industry where trust is exceptionally valuable. Whether those qualities directly motivated the acquisition cannot be known with certainty, but they closely align with the characteristics Buffett has often described when evaluating outstanding businesses. A monk with almost no money of his own helped take an existing young company with a small team and scale it into a $250 million operation, all while reportedly giving away nearly everything he personally earned. Here's what's interesting. Roach was not chasing personal luxury with that money. The profits from his work funded massive translation projects, food programs for exiled monks, and libraries preserving Tibetan texts that were nearly destroyed forever. He treated his income the way many financial experts recommend treating a windfall. He did not upgrade his lifestyle. He redirected the surplus towards something built to outlast him. Part 6. myth-busting, and criticisms. Now, an honest pattern interrupt. Not every part of this story is simple heroism, and a good financial education video should not pretend otherwise. Some critics have pointed out that Andin's true founders were Ofer and Aya Azrilant, and that Roach's later retelling of the story sometimes overstated his own role in starting the company. We must understand clearly, he was not an entrepreneur in the classical sense. He did not found Andin International from a legal standpoint. He did not risk his own capital at the start, and he did not carry primary shareholder liabilities. That credit belongs entirely to Ofer and Aya Azrilant. Roach was a brilliant corporate executive and a driving force in the operations, but he was a non-equity executive, not the entrepreneur who took the initial financial risks of founding the corporate entity. There have also been public controversies later in his life around some of his specific, unconventional teachings and personal choices. These choices eventually led to significant friction with parts of the traditional Buddhist community, including the office of the Dalai Lama. Why mention that here? Because real financial lessons do not require a perfect messenger. You can take the useful principle that transparency builds long-term equity faster than exaggeration does, without needing every detail of someone's biography to be flawless. Extract the strategy. Leave the rest for historians to argue about. Part 7. The Hidden Financial Mechanics. Let's slow down and pull out the actual financial mechanics hiding inside this story, because they apply directly to you. First, cash flow discipline. While the Diamond District heavily relied on risky, short-term credit to gamble on the next shipment, Andin focused on sustainable organic growth, reinvesting profits, and keeping its debt strictly controlled. Slower growth, but sturdier growth. Think about this in your own life. Growing your savings slowly through consistent habits beats growing debt quickly through convenient credit. It feels less exciting in the moment. It feels far better 5 years from now. Second, reputation as an asset. In the diamond trade, a dealer's word is worth more than any contract. Roach treated his reputation the same way a careful investor treats a stock portfolio. Something that compounds in value the longer you protect it, and something that can crash instantly the moment you mishandle it. Third, and this is the idea most people misunderstand about the diamond cutter philosophy. It was never about karma appearing out of nowhere like magic. It was about cause and effect applied practically. When you treat your employees well, turnover drops, saving you real recruiting costs. When you treat your suppliers honestly, they give you better terms during supply shortages. When you treat your customers with transparency, they come back without needing to be chased down with expensive advertising. None of that is mystical. That is just good business, dressed in older language. Here's a pattern interrupt worth pausing on. Stop and look at your own spending habits for a second. Are you treating money the way Andin treated its reputation? Something to protect patiently? Or are you treating it the way the rest of the Diamond District treated deals in the 80s? Something to squeeze for a quick win today. Part 8. The True Purpose of Capital. After stepping back from the business world, Roach shifted his focus almost entirely toward teaching. He wrote The Diamond Cutter, a book explaining these business ideas to a much wider audience, and it eventually became a bestseller translated into dozens of languages. He later founded organizations dedicated to bringing these same principles to entrepreneurs and executives around the world. He argued that ethical behavior was not just morally correct, but structurally more profitable over time. He also continued his religious work, founding a project dedicated to digitizing and preserving ancient Tibetan manuscripts, work that had been quietly funded by his years in the diamond trade in the first place. That is the full arc. A monk who was sent into the harshest corner of capitalism as an assignment, who applied centuries-old principles to modern deal-making, who helped scale a business into a company worth hundreds of millions, and who reportedly gave almost all of it away to protect a culture that was at risk of disappearing. Here's the final part before we close this out. You do not need to become a monk to apply any of this. You do not need to give away every dollar you earn. What you can borrow from this story is much simpler. Decide early what your money is actually for. Protect your reputation like it compounds, because it does. Choose transparency even when a shortcut is sitting right in front of you, especially in a market where shortcuts are common. And remember that the goal is not simply to make money. The goal is to make money serve something you actually care about. Somewhere between a temple in the mountains and a jewelry counter in Manhattan, one man tested whether old-world ethics could survive a modern deal. They did. Not because the market got softer, because he never did.